Halfway between Dumuzi's grave, or the stone altar, we find this beautiful carving out of Dolerite stone that clearly resembles a sphinx. It is very badly eroded, and I must also state at this stage that the Dolerite stone has a tendency to peel off, and in little layers. So some of these ancient structures, or these ancient statues and carvings made out of Dolerite, may have had facial features in ancient times, but because they are so old, these facial features and the more detailed features would have eroded and probably peeled off. And I find this is possibly the case with the Sphinx. Not only with the Sphinx, but also with a head of a Sphinx-like statue inside of Adam's calendar, which is clearly a head that fell off or broke off one of the bodies that we find at that particular point. Here is a beautiful example of an early Horus bird, or a Horus stone, right on the edge of Adam's calendar. This I discovered one early morning when I went out there to have a quick look at some other things, and mysteriously and by accident discovered there is a Horus stone right on the edge. It's got a big fat belly. It's about 3 meters tall, so if you stood it up, it's quite imposing. Was about 9 feet, 10 feet tall, and nice big fat belly, and the head comes around into the beak of the stone, which is broken off, and you can clearly see that this was a very, very old carving of a Horus or a bird-like statue. If you look at the layout of Adam's calendar, you can see the Horus bird right there, marking the rise of the sun, looking at the 3 stones that mark the rise of Orion's belt. And this is consistent with so many ancient sites and so many of these ancient structures when we start studying ancient civilizations and their obsessions with the stars, and specifically Orion's belt, Sirius, and also the Pleiades. And the Pleiades play a very important part in ancient African history and also in the history of the original people of Australia. Pleiades are very important in all of this. So how do we date the site? How do we date the stones? This is where it becomes really fun, because you can't date stones. You can't do carbon dating, although carbon dating has been shown to be most likely highly inaccurate. But we look at every possible angle. And I'm going to share some of these angles that we looked at and the arguments. And the first one is geology. First of all the stones at Adam's calendar that make up the actual site are not from there. They were brought from somewhere else to build the actual site. So that is already a very strong argument that the site was created and built by intent, and it is not just a natural formation of stones, which I must admit that some archaeologists and some geologists still hold on to that nonsensical notion. Even in the face of all the electronic measurements that we've done and everything else that we've presented. So the Dolerite stones were brought from somewhere else to construct the site. It is right on the edge of the Transvaal escarpment, which is a well-recognized geological feature. It is known as Black Reef Quartzite, rich in gold. Isn't that funny? Rich in gold. As I said before, in front of Adam's calendar in the Barberton Valley is where you find Sheba Gold Mine and many old ancient gold mines that have been covered by the sand from the flood. The next evaluation we looked at is the lichen that grows on the rocks. Now, the lichen that you find growing on this particular stone, there are different types of lichen. It's that fine material that grows on the rock. And some of it is a specific kind that grows very, very slowly. It grows 1 millimeter per annum. Now, these stones are covered in the lichen, and the wide calendar stone is about 2 meters wide. So for the lichen to cover that stone from side to side completely, not just one layer, but several layers of lichen upon lichen growing on top of each other, would take thousands and thousands of years. So the lichen alone tells us that the site is many thousands of years old. And the evaluation carries on. We look further at erosion. And this particular stone really tickled my fancy when I first found it, because the erosion on this stone was so extreme that it made me concerned about the age of the site. But when I present, because the other stones are not nearly as eroded as this particular one, so I thought, well, maybe the stone does erode a lot quicker than we imagine. until I met with Baba Credo Mutwa, and he told me that he was initiated at this particular site, and that is a very special sacred site. And then he told me, on their path, this stone happens to lie right next to this ritual path from the calendar to the stone altar, or Dumuzi's grave. And they used to stop on their walk during the ceremony, and they had to urinate on this particular stone. So it was the urinating on the stone that made it erode a lot quicker than all the other stones around it. So that brought a lot of relief to me, because it explains why this one eroded a lot quicker and took the erosion argument a lot deeper. Patina is a fascinating argument. Now, patina grows on these particular stones, and these are the stones that we find in the stone ruins scattered throughout this whole area. And these are stones that have very strong acoustic properties, which I'll talk about some more. But you can see in this particular image that the natural color of the stone is black. It's a black color. And then as it breaks, the patina starts to grow. And it's a combination of calcification and crystallization. And the patina grows both from the outside and also from the inside. So it almost like it consumes a bit of the stone from the outside. But this patina, this brownish reddish color, grows very, very slowly. The crystal substance, the crystal formation of the patina happens within milliseconds if you break the rock. It starts to grow immediately. But the thicker the patina grows, the slower it grows. Now, by the time you can see this patina growth with your naked eye, when it starts to come up as a very light brownish reddish sort of image, or it's like a shade that starts to appear on the rock, that particular patina growth is already a few thousand years old, because it grows so slowly. So when you find stones like this one inside the walls of one of the stone circles, this was one of the standing monoliths, and clearly it had a tip. That particular tip broke off at some stage. After it broke off, it's still standing in place right now. After it broke off, the patina has grown back on top of that stone about 2 millimeters. Now, what I can tell you is, for this patina to grow back 2 millimeters suggests that that stone, after the tip had broken off, that stone has been standing there for probably more than 100,000 years. And this is a very clear indicator how old some of these structures are. So patina growth is very, very important. This is another argument for the patina growth indicating how old some of these structures are. There are hundreds of carvings in rock similar to this one, showing the stone circles with no doors and entrances. And I've photographed probably 200 of these on rocks and stones in the vicinity of the stone circles. It seems that I'm not quite sure whether they carved the stone circles or the structure of them first, or they built the stone circles and then they carved the images into nearby stones to imitate the structure of the stone circle. This is still puzzling me. I'm not quite sure which came first. But this particular carving on this flat rock is a very important indicator of how old this carving most likely is, and how old the stone circles are. Because whoever created this carving would not have carved it over a crack. There are enough beautiful flat stones for you to make a beautiful fresh carving into a flat surface without a crack through it. So we have to assume that the crack occurred after the carving was made. Now, this is the same kind of rock, black on the inside, and the patina, the reddish patina, grows over the break when it breaks. Now, when you look at the crack through this carving, you cannot see any black rock at all. No evidence of the color of the rock on the inside, which means that the patina had grown back into the crack after the crack had formed. And this means that this carving must be way more than 50,000 years old for that patina to fill that crack so completely. So once again, simple observations like this just defy any logic why our historians and our archaeologists do not take this kind of clear indication into consideration. It boggles the mind, truly. Here is just a curiosity how thick-skinned our historians and archaeologists are when it comes to the dating of these stone structures and Adam's calendar. This is one of the ruins in Zimbabwe. and one of the famous Baobab trees that is estimated to be about 3,000 years old. This Baobab tree happens to be growing out of one of the walls. Now, clearly, it must have happened when a seed from a nearby Baobab tree fell into the wall and then it took root and started to grow, pushing the wall aside. But this is not what our historians will tell us. They tell us that the people that built this particular structure had a particular habit of building the walls into the tree. This is how thick-skinned they are and how determined they are to make these ancient sites not so old, because it's impossible for it to be more than 3,000 years old. So they had to come up with a nonsensical idea as to how the Baobab tree could possibly grow out of the wall. It's just a light-hearted moment in this research journey that we take. But by far the most mind-boggling discovery about the age of Adam's calendar is the archaeoastronomy. Because when you look at the Google shots, you can clearly see the ancient site was a circular structure, and the blob at the top was north and the blob at the bottom is south. But you can see that the north-south does not run at 12 o'clock. And that doesn't make any sense. These guys didn't make mistakes. They didn't accidentally build it off north, south, east, west. And when we measured this out, we found that the misalignment was about 3 degrees, 17 minutes and 43 seconds, or 42 seconds. And this counterclockwise. And this just doesn't make any sense. And remember that this has got nothing to do with the precessional wobble of the Earth, the fact that the Earth wobbles on its axis every 25, 26,000 years. This has got nothing to do with that. These are the cardinal points of planet Earth, north, south, east, west. That does not move. That should stay fixed. This is not magnetic north. This is true north. So what this tells us is that Adam's calendar was constructed at a time when north, south, east, west are not or were not where they are today. We just don't know when this is. And there's some researchers and scientists in the past that have speculated about giant catastrophes and cataclysms that would have been so dramatic that would have actually shifted the north-south alignment away from where it is today. Well, Adam's calendar is proof that we've had such a cataclysm, such a dramatic event in our history and the history of this planet that shifted north-south away from where it is today.